Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our commitment here is pretty simple, really. We take a powerful stack of research, of commentary, and we just distill the most essential, actionable knowledge for you.
The goal is to give you a shortcut, in a way, a shortcut to being profoundly well-informed, complete with the surprising facts and just enough depth so that it really sticks with you.
And today, we are doing a highly focused, really intensive study. We're embarking on a deep dive into just one piece of scripture, Psalm 63. It's often seen as David's great declaration of spiritual life right in the middle of physical ruin.
It's an absolutely remarkable text, especially for anyone who's facing, any kind of difficulty.
It really sets a powerful tone, doesn't it?
Well,
I've been working through some incredibly detailed commentary on this psalm, and it was all provided by the UNFIJ in Jesus team.
Right, and their mission seems to align perfectly with ours. They're all about synthesizing these ancient, sometimes complex truths, and then translating them directly into wisdom we can actually apply.
Right now, in the real struggles of modern life.
And that translation, from the historical to the personal, that's absolutely critical. So before we even start analyzing the text itself, we have to set the stage. The context is everything.
Okay, so where are we?
Well, the psalm is explicitly labeled a psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. And we have to be clear, this is not some kind of cozy religious retreat.
No, not at all. This is a place of absolute desolation.
Exactly. When you hear wilderness of Judah, you should picture this arid, broken landscape that runs down toward the Dead Sea. It's incredibly rugged, it's rocky, and it's notorious for being just inhospitable.
A place where just surviving is a daily fight. And the historical moment, the reason he's there, is just as desperate. Most scholars believe he's likely fleeing his own rebellious son, Absalom.
Which is a betrayal that has to cut deeper than any physical hardship could.
Oh, absolutely. It's personal, it's political, it's existential danger all rolled into one.
And the sources we reviewed, especially from the You Need Faith in Jesus team, they really highlight this reality. David is experiencing intense physical distress. The very real lack of water, the heat, the arid land.
And that situation perfectly mirrors his spiritual longing, right?
It becomes this immediate, visceral metaphor for the condition of his soul.
So this setting, it's the ultimate crucible for faith. I mean, if David's focus was on his crown or his kingdom or his personal comfort, this situation would have just crushed him.
But that's the critical insight shared by the You Need Faith in Jesus team. His difficult, defining circumstances didn't destroy his faith. They did the opposite. They fundamentally intensified his need for God.
And that's really the mission of this whole discussion, isn't it? We want to understand that ultimately, how does absolute physical and political distress transform into this settled, satisfied praise?
How does he go from a man literally dying of thirst to a man boasting about a feast? Well, let's jump into the text and find out.
Okay, let's unpack this opening segment. We start not with, a whisper of anxiety or a plea for rescue, but with this seismic declaration.
A roar of theological conviction right in the face of crisis. David establishes his identity before he even details his need.
It's a profound statement of relationship, and it's rooted in a covenant that was made long before this moment of trouble.
Let's hear that opening declaration in full. We're reading from the King James Version, Psalm chapter 63, verse 1. O God, thou art my God, early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is.
That opening phrase, "O God, thou art my God," it's so easy to just gloss over that. But the analysis from the You Need Faith in Jesus team really emphasizes that this is the bedrock of the entire psalm.
He's affirming his covenant relationship first. He's not negotiating, he's not wishing, he's stating it as an existing, non-negotiable fact.
So in his moment of deepest crisis, his primary identity marker is that he belongs to God. God belongs to him.
That covenant claim is the anchor. It's what prevents the chaos of the wilderness from just pulling him under, and that security, it leads immediately to action. Notice the urgency. Early will I seek thee.
And that word for seek early, Shachar, it means more than just getting up at dawn, doesn't it?
Oh, much more. It means to seek diligently, intensely, earnestly. It implies a kind of radical priority.
So even while he's fleeing for his life, facing an imminent threat from his own son's army, his priority isn't tactical survival. It's not hiding or planning his next move.
The priority is seeking the divine. Shachar defines God as the first, the highest, and the most important priority of his entire existence. It's even above self-preservation.
And this spiritual urgency is immediately put into context by the physical setting. I mean, he is quite literally stranded in a dry and thirsty land where no water is.
But the dry land isn't just a place he happens to be. It's a perfect metaphor for that emptiness inside him, and it's driving his spiritual hunger. This craving he has, it's expressed as a full-body need.
It's a comprehensive longing, right? It's not just in his head. It affects both his soul, the hir nephesh, his innermost being, and his flesh, his actual body.
Exactly. He feels his need for God as acutely as a man dying of dehydration feels the need for physical water. It's an intellectual, emotional, and physical imperative. It affects every single part of his humanity.
And this is where the ancient text, just speaks so directly to the New Testament. The analytical team at UNFIJ in Jesus' team notes that this deep, primal human thirst for God,
which David articulates so perfectly in the Old Covenant,
is exactly what the New Covenant was designed to fully and ultimately satisfy.
It moves us seamlessly to the concept of the living water. David is yearning for physical water, yes, but the commentary shows that the ultimate answer to his deeper thirst is Christ.
So how does the New Testament directly address this specific kind of soul thirst?
Well, the ultimate quenching is found in the final days of the Feast of Tabernacles. It's recorded in the Gospel of John, chapter 7, verse 37. Jesus stands up and makes this extraordinary open-air declaration that directly responds to David's ancient cry. In the last day, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, "If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink."
Wow. Just think about that cosmic contrast for a second. You have David, thirsting in the dusty, treacherous hills of Judea, just yearning for something to fill that core existential emptiness.
And then, centuries later, Jesus the Messiah presents himself as the precise ultimate answer to that deep soul thirst. He is the living water. He satisfies the need that everything else in creation just fails to meet.
So the sources, they really challenge us today, just as David was challenged then, to assess the urgency of our own pursuit. Are we seeking him shachar, early and diligently?
Or are we, in all our modern comfort, just trying to fill that spiritual void, that internal dry land, with temporary things? Possessions, social status, digital distractions. We use them all to stave off that feeling of emptiness.
That's such a great point. We don't face Absalom's army every day, but the modern believer faces these different internal wildernesses.
Like what?
Well, digital burnout, for one.
Yeah.
Existential loneliness, constant pressure, professional uncertainty. We try to self-medicate or just distract ourselves with noise rather than allowing that emptiness to drive us, like it drove David, to God first and with everything we have.
And the detailed analysis from the You Need Faith in Jesus team reminds us that those wilderness experiences are actually, well, they're gifts. They're designed by providence to strip away our false dependencies.
And expose how desperately we truly need him.
Right, prompting us to seek him with our whole being. The moment we start running from the emptiness and start running toward the source of satisfaction is the moment we truly internalize the truth of Psalm 63.
And this flows so naturally from the desire for satisfaction to the desire for intimacy. David's longing isn't just for protection or provision. It's profoundly personal. He wants God's presence itself.
Which brings us to verse 2. It says from Psalm chapter 63, verse 2, "To see thy power and thy glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary."
He's deliberately activating his spiritual memory. He's in exile. He's separated from Jerusalem. But he is actively recalling these profound past encounters with God's majesty.
Right, likely during corporate worship in the tabernacle, which he calls the sanctuary here.
And this recollection, it's a statement of faith, isn't it?
It is. David is basically saying, I know what you are capable of. I remember what it felt like to be completely overwhelmed by your power and thy glory back when I was safe and surrounded by the structures of worship.
And now, stuck in this harsh, isolated reality of the wilderness, his ultimate desire is to prove that the glorious reality of God isn't confined to a building or a schedule or a comfortable circumstance.
He needs that glory to break through the difficulty and the despair of his present situation. It's a prayer for continuity. He's asking for the past reality of God's presence to invade his current crisis.
This is a longing that I think every mature believer shares. It really echoes the plea of Moses, the great leader, back in Exodus chapter 33, verse 18.
Yes, that's a fantastic connection. Moses had just witnessed rebellion and despair among the Israelites. He didn't ask for an easier job or more obedient people or, a clearer map to the promised land. He just pleaded. And he said, I beseech thee, show me thy glory.
That's the absolute core of true faith, isn't it? For both David and Moses, the central longing isn't just to get things from God, provision, victory, success, but to know God more intimately.
To behold his essence, his power and glory. This is the ultimate litmus test of where our deepest desire really lies.
And the notes from the analytical team stress that our past experiences of God's faithfulness, those moments we saw his glory in our own metaphorical sanctuary, they have to function as fuel.
Not just nostalgic memories.
Exactly. If we allow a difficult change in circumstance to convince us that we're somehow cut off from his presence, we fundamentally misunderstand who God is.
So the takeaway for you, listening right now, is this. Don't let a memory of past faith become a source of guilt or longing for the good old days. Use that memory, that empirical proof of God's past help, to intensify your demand for his presence now.
Ask to see his power and his glory at work in your life today, wherever you are standing. Prove that his presence is location independent.
And remember, to truly see his glory often means seeing his power and sustaining you through the lack, not just providing the abundance. The power is so often revealed in the perseverance itself.
So David has established his intense thirst and his absolute desire for God's presence. Now, he has to explain the radical rationale for his constant praise, even when his life is hanging by a thread.
Which takes us to the concept of loving kindness. He declares this is the basis for his radical choice, and this starts in verse 3.
This is where he articulates the profound valuation that completely reorients his entire existence.
Let's read it. Psalm chapter 63, verses 3 and 4. Because thy loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise thee. Thus will I bless thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in thy name.
Better than life. That is such an audacious, almost reckless thing to claim when you are physically on the run from a violent coup led by your own son.
It is. And to understand it, we have to spend some time defining loving kindness. What exactly is this concept, and how can it possibly outweigh basic physical survival?
It's the Hebrew word hesed, right?
It is, and it's maybe the single most important theological concept in the Old Testament. It gets translated as loving kindness, steadfast love, mercy. But it means so much more than just simple kindness or, general goodwill.
So what's the core of it?
The core is commitment. Hesed describes an active, loyal, self-giving commitment that is rooted in a binding promise, a covenant.
So it's not just a feeling of affection. It's covenant fidelity in action. It's dependable.
Precisely. It's the kind of loyalty that God swore to Noah, to Abraham, and to David himself. A loyalty that endures no matter what, regardless of the recipient's performance or merit.
So David knew that even if he lost his kingdom, his son, and his own life, God has said his covenant loyalty would remain intact. That is the infinite, non-negotiable value.
And we struggle with this idea today because we tend to value temporary things, physical health, security, wealth, reputation. David, having been stripped of all those things, he performed this internal spiritual calculation.
He weighed his own temporary existence, his breath, his title, his safety, against the certainty and perfection of God's hesed.
And his conclusion was revolutionary. Even a difficult, short life with God's unchanging, loyal love was infinitely more valuable than a long, comfortable, successful life without it.
A life outside that covenant of God's steadfast love is, to David, just not worth living.
And when you realize that, the response is immediate and absolute. Praise is the only logical and natural consequence. His commitment isn't subject to his circumstances, it's a lifelong decision. Thus will I bless thee while I live.
The praise continues even if the wilderness never ends.
And notice the physical expression, I will lift up my hands in thy name. The analytical materials from the You Need Faith in Jesus team stress that this is not just some empty gesture.
It's a deliberate outward expression of an inner attitude.
Of complete dependence, surrender, and worship. He is publicly stating, I place my survival, my hope, my entire future into your capable hands. It's an act of deep trust made visible.
And this valuation, this idea that the relationship with God transcends all earthly value, it's the same radical conviction we see hundreds of years later in the writings of the Apostle Paul.
Yes, the parallel is often drawn to Philippians chapter 1, verse 21, where Paul, who is facing imprisonment and possible death, makes a very similar declaration. He says, For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain.
So whether it's David fleeing a coup or Paul facing persecution, the relationship with God defined by his loyal covenant love, his hesed.
That was the single supreme value of their entire existence. Everything else was secondary, even life itself.
And that fundamentally challenges us, doesn't it? We have to genuinely ask ourselves, is God's love demonstrated through Christ truly better than life to us?
If we faced losing our job, our health, our status, but we retained our relationship with God, Would we still honestly feel that we had retained everything of ultimate value?
When that truth, that foundational valuation sinks in, praise completely transforms. It stops being an emotional reaction to feeling good.
And it becomes a constant chosen state of the heart, irrespective of the external environment or the current news cycle. It's a declaration of allegiance.
That profound valuation leads directly to a feeling of incredible fulfillment. Which brings us to verse 5. And this verse uses the most luxurious, decadent imagery imaginable to describe what happens when you seek God first.
It's a wonderful contradiction. This is Psalm chapter 63, verse 5. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips.
We have to really linger on this imagery because the context is so vital. He is in a dry and thirsty land where he's literally starving and dehydrated, yet he claims his innermost being is satisfied as with marrow and fatness. How does the commentary explain that?
Well, the contradiction is the key to the spiritual truth. In ancient Near Eastern culture, marrow and fatness weren't just random rich foods. They represented the richest, most succulent, most fulfilling parts of a celebratory meal.
Often reserved for sacrifices or high feasts of abundance.
Exactly. Think of a massive, joyous banquet. So David is essentially saying his soul is enjoying a perpetual, massive banquet with the finest spiritual nourishment while his body is physically starving and running for its life.
That's incredible. He is declaring that fellowship with God nourishes and satisfies his innermost being more completely than the most luxurious food could ever satisfy his physical hunger.
The external physical discomfort is rendered totally irrelevant by the internal state of divine contentment. This is why the sources from the You Need Faith in Jesus team call this a radical inversion of his physical state.
And the result of that internal feasting is just unavoidable. That deep soul-level satisfaction overflows into joyful, audible praise coming from joyful lips.
Well,
He doesn't have to force the praise.
it's the natural consequence of having feasted on the divine presence, the only true nourishment.
Which brings us directly back to Christ, the ultimate source of spiritual nourishment that the Old Testament feasts were all foreshadowing. It reminds me of John chapter 6, verse 35.
Where Jesus proclaims himself as the source of ultimate, lasting satisfaction.
Let's hear it.
And Jesus said unto them, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger, and he that believeth on me shall never thirst.
So, David is yearning for the spiritual feast in the wilderness. And centuries later, Christ declares that he is the feast. The connection just demonstrates that the satisfaction David felt was rooted in the very nature of God, who would ultimately become incarnate as the bread of life.
And the practical challenge for us, as highlighted by the You Need Faith in Jesus team materials, is profound. We are bombarded by a modern culture that constantly tells us to satisfy our soul hunger with temporary, accessible substitutes.
Spiritual junk food.
That's a great way to put it. Digital distraction, impulsive purchases, emotional drama, transient achievements, they're easy to get.
They might briefly suppress the hunger pangs, but they never truly fill the void. They leave you bloated but still starving.
And David's assertion reminds us that only God is the source of true, lasting contentment, the rich marrow and fatness for the soul.
When we make that conscious decision to choose God as our primary source of nourishment, our hearts are truly full, and joyful praise just becomes the default setting, regardless of whether we are in a physical sanctuary or stuck in our own personal wilderness.
David's devotion isn't limited to moments of spiritual elevation during the day. His commitment is, well, it's 247. And this brings us to a crucial element, his practice during the night watches.
Right. This is the time when anxiety, fear, and loneliness, the internal enemies, they often hit their peak.
The darkness, the quiet, the vulnerability of being exposed on his, temporary bed out in the wilderness, that is when fear is amplified and existential doubts just scream their loudest.
But David has an active spiritual discipline designed to counteract that corrosive anxiety. We see this intentional practice in Psalm chapter 63, verses 6 and 7.
When I remember thee upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches, because thou hast been my help, therefore in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice.
This is so critical. He doesn't just passively endure sleeplessness, he actively redirects it. He remembers and he meditates. That's a conscious, focused redirection of his thoughts away from his imminent danger and toward God's character.
It is the intentional weaponization of memory. David is deliberately focusing his thoughts on God's unchanging character and, most importantly, on God's past actions in his life. His foundation for confidence isn't some abstract hope.
It's empirical evidence.
Exactly. Thou hast been my help. He takes the specific record of God delivering him from the lion, the bear, the giant Goliath, King Saul, and he uses those past deliverances to build present faith. He weaponizes his memories to assure himself that the God who acted then is the God who is protecting him right now.
And because God was his helper in the past, he can now find safety and rejoice even in this vulnerable, temporary state. He takes refuge in the shadow of thy wings.
That's one of the most tender images in all of Scripture. It speaks of a mother bird shielding her young, complete, intimate security and tender protective care right in the face of danger.
It speaks to a deep, childlike trust. And this protective imagery of the wings is such a comforting, recurring theme throughout the Psalms, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We see it echoed so powerfully in Psalm chapter 91, verse 4, which assures the believer. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler.
The truth of God's history becomes the shield against the present threat.
And the lesson for us is immediate and profound, especially in our high-anxiety age. When we find ourselves awake at 3 a.m., tossing with worry over financial pressure or a relational breakdown or professional uncertainty, David's example teaches us to combat that anxiety by intentional spiritual discipline.
The analytical material from the You Need Faith in Jesus team really emphasizes that we must not allow the darkness and the quiet to become a vacuum for our worries. We have to actively substitute that fear with the intentional recall of God's specific, verifiable acts of faithfulness in our own lives.
Recall that problem he solved 5 years ago, that moment of provision, that time he gave you strength when you had none.
And that mental substitution, it transforms anxiety into anticipation. It builds the necessary faith to trust him in the current situation, leading us not just to a temporary calm, but to genuine rest and rejoicing in the assurance of his persistent protective care.
This brings us to a beautiful, highly dynamic verse, maybe the most theologically complex in the entire Psalm, verse 8. It perfectly captures the essential balance between human effort and divine enablement.
It's that tension, right? Between striving with all our might and resting entirely in God's power.
It truly summarizes the dynamic of grace and works. Psalm chapter 63, verse 8, My soul followeth hard after thee, thy right hand upholdeth me.
Let's break down the two halves, starting with the human part. My soul followeth hard after thee. This is not casual devotion.
No, not at all. This is an aggressive, determined, passionate pursuit. The original Hebrew term suggests a clinging, a cleaving, the sense of being stuck fast to something, like glue. It is an intense, focused spiritual effort.
So David is exhausting all his spiritual resources. He is seeking God's shachar early, he's meditating in the night, and he's clinging with all his soul. That is the human responsibility, the striving that's required of us.
But immediately he pivots and recognizes the fundamental theological truth. His ability to even maintain that fierce grip is only possible because God is already holding him. The second half is the assurance, thy right hand upholdeth me.
And the right hand is far more than just a limb here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In Scripture, the right hand is the symbol of active power, of strength, authority, and sovereign action. David isn't holding on to God with his own weak, fluctuating human strength. He's being held securely and sustained by God's sovereign, enabling power.
So our active, passionate pursuit of God is not the cause of our perseverance or security?
But rather the response to the fact that God's pre-existing power is already sustaining us, enabling us to cleave to him.
It's the perfect synthesis of divine grace and human action, a dynamic that is affirmed all throughout the New Testament.
It is. And the analytical sources from the You Need Faith in Jesus team connect this profound tension directly to Philippians chapter 2, verses 12 and 13, which describes this working partnership for the believer. Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure.
So we work out our faith, we follow hard after God, but we do it with the confidence that the desire, the strength, and the very ability to do so are empowered by God working inside us.
We are doing the willing and the doing because he is enabling the willing and the doing.
And the strength of this teaching is that it removes the fear of failure, which is such a common fear in the spiritual life. We don't have to fear falling away because our perseverance isn't dependent solely on our fluctuating human energy.
Right. We press into him, not in fear of losing him, but in the confidence that his strong right hand holds us fast as we strive to follow. He sustains the very pursuit that we initiate.
We now encounter a pretty dramatic shift in tone and focus. After all this intense, intimate conversation about his own soul's satisfaction, David turns his attention outward.
Outward to the very real, lethal threat surrounding him. the enemies who are seeking his life. This is a sudden, powerful, and confident declaration of God's inevitable justice.
It's the natural outcome of worship, isn't it? Stepping out of intimacy with God and into the world with confidence in his sovereignty.
It is. Psalm chapter 63, verses 9 and 10, they outline the definitive fate of those seeking his destruction. But those that seek my soul to destroy it shall go into the lower parts of the earth. They shall fall by the sword. They shall be a portion for foxes.
This is raw. These are not distant, abstract enemies. These are the forces likely led by his own son, Absalom, actively seeking to kill David and destroy his God-given rule.
And his declaration of their fate is utterly conclusive and devastating. It speaks of total defeat and profound disgrace.
Go into the lower parts of the earth implies being consigned to the grave or Sheol. They shall fall by the sword. Means military defeat. But let's talk about that last part, the cultural horror of it.
A portion for foxes. While often translated as foxes, the term usually refers to jackals or wild scavengers common in that region.
And culturally, the refusal of a proper burial was the ultimate mark of disgrace and defeat, wasn't it?
The absolute ultimate. The enemies will be unceremoniously killed and their bodies left as carrion. They lose not only their life, but their dignity, their memory, and their legacy.
This is why it's so important to interpret these kinds of psalms correctly. The commentary from the You Need Faith in Jesus team makes it very clear. This is not David indulging in petty personal revenge.
No, this is David, as the anointed king, making a faith-filled declaration of God's ultimate certain justice. He is absolutely convinced that God will vindicate his servant and that, ultimately, spiritual and political evil will not be allowed to triumph over God's established plan.
So he isn't taking vengeance into his own hands. He's acting as a prophet, really, declaring the inevitable outcome of divine justice over rebellion.
Exactly. But this raises a crucial question for us, for the modern listener. It's one thing for David, the king facing a coup, to pray for his enemies' utter destruction. How does this aggressive declaration reconcile with the New Testament command to love and forgive our enemies?
That's where the New Testament provides the refining lens, right? While David declares the certainty of judgment, the New Testament instructs believers on our personal response to personal injustice.
We have to trust that the final judgment is God's purview, not ours. That principle is most famously articulated by Paul in Romans chapter 12, verse 19. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord.
And this gives us incredible psychological and spiritual freedom. We are called to love, to forgive, and to pray for our personal enemies, showing mercy and grace.
But we simultaneously hold a firm, confident belief that God is a just judge who will ultimately deal with all rebellion and evil, both individual and systemic. We don't have to carry the overwhelming burden of achieving perfect justice on earth.
The deep perspective provided by the commentary assures us of two things. First, the certainty of God's vindication, which we see in David's psalm. And second, the patience required while waiting for that vindication, which we see in Paul's letter.
We can confidently leave the execution of final justice in his capable hands, trusting the judge implicitly.
And that confidence in ultimate justice sets up the triumphant conclusion of the psalm, asserting David's God-given future and the shared fate of all who follow him.
Which brings us to verse 11, Psalm chapter 63, verse 11. But the king shall rejoice in God, everyone that sweareth by him shall glory, but the mouth of them that speak lies shall be stopped.
He speaks of himself in the third person here, the king. This asserts his God-given authority, which his enemies are failing to steal. But he doesn't say the king will rejoice in his restored kingdom.
No, his ultimate joy is in God.
His joy isn't rooted in the temporary defeat of Absalom's rebellion, but in the security of his relationship with the Almighty.
And this victory has profound shared implications. All those who align themselves with God and his legitimate anointed ruler, everyone that sweareth by him, which means those who pledge loyalty and fidelity, they will share in the resulting glory.
They'll be vindicated and glorified right alongside him. And the final word is one of silencing. The deceitful, the rebellious, those who have spoken lies against God's plan and his appointed king.
Their mouth shall be stopped. Total and final spiritual and political victory.
For us today, this entire conclusion points us toward the ultimate king whom David merely foreshadowed, Jesus Christ.
That's right. David's temporary physical victory over his enemies is just a historical snapshot of our ultimate king's final eternal victory over sin, death, and all opposition.
Our hope rests entirely on that final assured victory. If we place our faith in King Jesus, we are among those who swear by him, and we are guaranteed to glory with him. our victory is tied to his.
The book of Revelation provides the perfect, final picture of this eternal outcome. It's confirmed in Revelation chapter 22, verse 3, describing the new creation. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servant shall serve him.
The ultimate reign where every lie is silenced, every curse is lifted, and we serve the King forever. That sure, absolute hope centered on Christ's final victory is what gives us the strength to persevere through the trials of our present wilderness, confident that our King has the final, decisive word.
This deep dive into Psalm 63, guided by the robust material from the You Need Faith in Jesus team, has powerfully demonstrated how spiritual reality must completely override physical circumstances.
David moved from absolute physical need to satisfied praise, not by escaping the wilderness, but by proactively, intensely finding God in the middle of it.
And the practical power of this song is its roadmap for daily living. We can distill David's journey into 4 actionable, specific steps for you, the listener, drawn directly from the text and the comprehensive notes we analyzed.
Okay, action 1, prioritization. This comes right from the intense seeking of verse 1. Commit to seeking God early and urgently. That sharp pursuit must be adopted in your life.
We have to assess what we habitually put first: our phones, our worries, our to-do lists, the news, and consciously substitute seeking God's presence as the first, most urgent resource we tap every single day.
Making him the absolute first priority.
Action 2, meditation. This is the crucial discipline found in the night watches of verse 6. Use times of quiet and potential anxiety, especially sleepless nights, not for running those mental loops of worry, but for intentional, active meditation on God's proven faithfulness.
Recall specific instances of his help, his specific victories in your past. This intentional mental substitution is what transforms crippling anxiety into calm anticipation.
Action 3, valuation. Reconfirm the core truth of verse 3. God's loyal, covenant-loving kindness, his hesed, must be valued as better than life to you.
This is a profound evaluation that has to be made, not just vaguely felt. When you genuinely grasp this radical valuation, your praise transforms from an unstable emotional reaction to a constant, joyful, chosen response, regardless of your immediate circumstances.
And finally, action 4, active pursuit. Embrace the divine dynamic of verse 8. Strive with all your soul to follow hard after God, utilizing all spiritual disciplines. But crucially, recognize that your maximum effort is fully empowered and sustained by his strong, upholding right hand.
So you practice intentional spiritual disciplines, prayer, scripture study, service with a rock-solid confidence that your perseverance is secured by his power, not your fluctuating willpower.
That is the genius of Psalm 63. It provides a complete spiritual arc, moving from desperate thirst to satisfied praise, proving definitively that God is experienced most profoundly, not when we are safe and comfortable,
but when we are stripped of all other comforts and forced to depend on him completely in the demanding reality of the wilderness.
The lessons underscore that the greatest revelations of God's power and glory often occur when we are at our weakest point, forced back to that foundational relationship where Hesed becomes everything.
We are encouraged through this profound depth of ancient wisdom to embrace the necessity of the wilderness for spiritual growth.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you today, a question built entirely on the beautiful contradiction we found in this song.
If David found his soul satisfied as with marrow and fatness, that's from Psalm chapter 63, verse 5, while he was simultaneously physically running for his life and likely dying of thirst in the wilderness.
What does that radical spiritual satisfaction tell you about the quality and the effectiveness of the temporary things you currently pursue to satisfy your own soul?
And if you truly believed that God's presence was all the satisfaction you needed right now, how radically, practically would you need to change your priorities this week?
Something to truly meditate on when you lay down upon your bed tonight.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Psalm 63. We encourage you to take this actionable knowledge and apply it to your own dry and thirsty land. Until next time.